Today's video is going to include a rant, just giving you that heads up now. But it is going to be a kind of random collection of various different things. So at its core, I am doing another A Fantasy Fan Reads. This was kind of on accident, and if you're new and you don't know, I primarily read and review fantasy books, and in an effort to try and broaden my reading horizons, you could say, and either really dive deep into a specific subgenre of fantasy or dive into a different genre entirely to allow myself to experience those genres and compare and contrast them to fantasy, I have started this video series that I plan to continue into 2025. The next formal one is going to actually be for steampunk, but I sort of accidentally did another one, and that's what this is today, and it's for a very hyper-specific subgenre, you could say, which would be holiday romances. I know this seems so incredibly random, so I want to give you the origin story of how this video came to be. Some of you may have heard that Wind and Truth came out recently, which is the 5th book in the Storm Light Archive by Brandon Sanderson. And I, like many people, have been waiting, chomping at the bit for this conclusion to this arc. I wanted to ensure, because I really enjoy the community aspect of being a fan of the Cosmere and getting to theorize, I wanted to continue that feeling, which I've kind of been doing a little bit here and there leading up to the release of Wind and Truth. I wanted to continue that after Wind and Truth was out. So over on my side channel, World Hoppers, it's a collaborative channel. All the AdSense revenue goes to charity as well as merch sales. I decided I wanted to do in-depth discussions with some of my friends here on BookTube for Wind and Truth. For the first discussion, we're only talking about days 1 and 2. And this wasn't a stipulation I put on the other people in this video, but I did put this on myself that I was only allowed to read up until the point that we would be discussing for that video. And as a result, I read all of days 1 and 2, basically the day that Wind and Truth came out. And then I was like, this sucks, because I really want to keep reading. It is so filled. Wind and Truth is so filled with so many little tiny details of things that if you have been a Cosmere fan for years, you've started to pick up on how Sanderson foreshadows, and you're like, I think this is something, I think this is something. Oh my gosh, this theory that we've been having, I'm pretty sure that this is starting to reveal to us that the theory is true. But in the meantime, between the discussions, I can't pick up another fantasy series right now because I'm just so engrossed in the events of this one. There's so much going on. There's so many things to latch onto and to potentially let percolate in your mind that I don't really want to pick up another fantasy story. But I also know that if I don't read something, I'm going to fall to the temptation of reading more Wind and Truth. So I was like, how about I take some of those Book of the Month books that I've been given over the years or that I have decided to check out, because I do have a subscription to Book of the Month. And this isn't sponsored by Book of the Month. I just happen to have pretty much all of these through Book of the Month. So I was like, I have a fair amount of holiday romances. Let's read that. I do want to say, full disclosure, I've already read 4 of the 5 books. I've started the 5th one, and the only reason I haven't finished the 5th one is because the main character is so incredibly stupid that I was like, pause. I gotta get some tabs. I haven't finished that one, but we will be going through thoughts on each of these books. And also, I'm going to include clips of my dog because she has a green bandana on right now, and I'm like, that's wintry, right? So I thought I'd include some clips of her just to be festive. But yeah, I thought this would be kind of a fun way to distract myself from picking up more Wind and Truth. So we'll segue on over to some clips of Luna, and then we'll discuss some of what's been going on in these books.
Good morning. Good morning. Oh, hi. Hi. Oh, good morning. Yeah, hi. Hi. Do you want a snacky? Well, yeah, that's where I'm pointing, Mom. Go to bed. Go to your bed. Sit. Shake. Paw. Other paw. Good job.
An additional thing that I thought would be fun for this video is once I have indeed completed the book that entails the life of this idiot character, I do want to then let you know my favorite to least favorite. Spoiler alert, the least favorite is going to be the one with the dummy. I also thought it'd be fun to predict what I think the average ratings would place them at. So there will be my ranking, my prediction of society's ranking, readers' rankings, I should say. What my predictions would be for the average ratings, and then actually seeing what the end result is and trying to just guess, because as somebody who's not in the know about romances, I just think it'll be interesting and potentially embarrassing to try and predict and either be really, really wrong or be right on the money. That'd be kind of fun. Nice little pat on the back. Let's go ahead though and talk about my thoughts on the 4 of the 5 that I have read. I decided when I went into these that I wasn't going to look at the synopsis whatsoever. At one time, I had looked at the synopsis when I selected them for my Book of the Month pick, but since then, they have all kind of turned into this snowstorm of romance tropes that I just didn't know which one was which. I just knew like, oh, this has something to do with Christmas or winter. First one that I ended up picking up, I'm pretty sure this author is quite popular, and I've just never picked anything up by them, and that would be In a Holidaze. So I want to tell you about this book. This book follows a young woman, her family, and friends of the family since she was a kid would all go to this cabin together. She, as a result, is very close to everybody that they go to visit. They do this every year for the holidays, and she has a particular person within this group that she has basically been in love with and had a crush on since she was a kid. Just to be clear, the person was also a child when she was a child. But anyway, so they grow up, they're childhood friends, they grow into adulthood, and she, as a young adult, is realizing, like, I still am so head over heels for this man, and he has no idea. And when the book opens, it opens with her realizing, like, what have I done? Because she drank some eggnog and she got tipsy, and then she made out with that guy's brother. And she's like, oh no. And she feels like she's ruined her life and her chance with this man that she's in love with. And you're like, yeah, making out with his brother, that might be a way to do it. So you might not be wrong in saying, like, I might have messed up my chance. As they're leaving the cabin, they also find out that the guy that she has a crush on, his family is the one that owns this cabin. And they're like, the cabin is old and we just can't keep up with all of the maintenance. We're going to sell it. And this is kind of like a goodbye in every way. Like, she's never going to have her relationship with her crush, and the family cabin / family friends cabin is going to be sold. And it just feels like life sucks right now. And she makes this wish as they're driving back to the airport of like, I just wish I could be given the thing that would make me happy. And then there's a car accident and she wakes up and she's back on the plane before going to the cabin. She's headed back to the cabin. She's reliving those days. She's getting another chance. And she's not just getting one chance, she's getting several chances. Because the second that she starts to deviate from what she guesses is not the path that's going to make her happy, then she starts back on the plane headed to this cabin. Okay, so already the concept, I'm like, this is gonna be quirky, and you just gotta go with the fact that randomly she ends up traveling in time and redoing the same day. It's a take on a trope that's happened in movies and things like that before. I'm not upset about that, but I will say from a personal standpoint, I already don't love this in contemporary stories. I don't love this device in contemporary stories because you just have to ask 2 things of the character and the reader, which is you have to ask them to just go with it or pretend like it's not a big deal. Like, the go with it option is like, oh my gosh, there's an acknowledgement of like, what the heck? And then being like, I guess this is my life now. And then they just go with it, right? Or the other option of just pretending like that's normal, which is more like magical realism. Is this even happening? Which that's not this book at all. Girl, woman, she's a young woman. She absolutely is aware of the fact that this is bizarre and, oh my gosh, did I get a head injury? And, things like that. So I appreciated the self-awareness. But my problem with any book that uses this in a contemporary setting is, how do you resolve that? How do you resolve it? Because, and I guess, spoilers for the book if you care, and I can have a timestamp, so if you do care, you're not spoiled. But there's this scene later on. Basically, everything goes great with her love interest because she doesn't get drunk and make out with his brother. Instead, she just tells him how she feels, and what do you know, that worked. And they end up having this little like, oh my gosh, we have to hide in the closet and make out and not let everybody in the family see. Oh, they're just so into each other. And how lucky, because she has been infatuated with him and it turns out he really likes her too. And so it's all going great and it's cute. However, she's starting to panic because she's like, I keep having to relive and I'm just so scared that I'm gonna go back in time again. And at one point she just starts saying, I've lived this moment before and this has happened this many times. And she starts telling the love interest like why she's acting weird. She starts telling him about the fact that she went back in time a number of times. And the first time it happened, it seemed like part of the reason was because she made out with his brother. And he's like, what? You made out with my brother? And she's like, in a different time, but like it meant nothing. And he's like, but you think you made out with my brother though? Also, what? Like, he's so kind of confused, which is a fair reaction, I feel, for all that information. She has this thought, and this is like, I guess the specific spoiler I wanted to touch on. She has this thought of like, I don't know what I'll do if he doesn't believe me. And I was like, I don't think anybody will, really, like in actuality. And that's what I mean about this sort of plot. It was like, what? You have to... Okay, so we've already established that this character, it's happening to them, so they have no choice but to accept it. That's fine. But this isn't a known thing to happen in people's lives outside of, like, movies. So the idea of, like, what am I gonna do if he doesn't believe me? I don't think I'll be able to handle it if he doesn't believe me. And I'm like, that's a pretty big ask. He's also written in the most female gaze kind of way. You know how people talk about, like, I'm sure you know, I'm not introducing anything new to you, but there's the whole, like, the male gaze, the helpless but hot girl who's also, like, maybe a little kinky, but also, like, you can take her home to mom. That character that in a movie is always going to be like, what are we going to do? And then the male character can, like, save the day. That character exists to prop up the male character in a story, right? Which a lot of us are like, that's not the most, interesting of characters. But the reverse can happen of the like it actually makes me sad that there's even a concept to describe these character types and how they're executed. Female gaze versus male gaze character. And I don't typically talk about these sorts of things because I think it can reduce the nuanced conversation about how people write and how gender is in a story impacted by real world events or different places or different times. And I don't know, I just feel like it can lose some of it because it's a buzzword on the internet or a buzz phrase. But the concept of female gaze being like this guy that's just so nice and is really accepting and just treats you well, it makes me sad that that's what that means. But anyway, he is kind of that, like, he doesn't really seem to have any flaws. He's like very attractive, but like in a normal way. And he's really supportive. He can basically just roll with anything that she's thrown out there kind of thing. And he's perfect, basically. Like, perfectly nice human being who isn't actually a human because no human's that perfect. You know, like that kind of character. That's definitely true of him. But I'm like, dude, you're also on top of already making him the most perfect character. We're gonna make him have to believe that she actually went back in time over and over and over again? I don't know, that seems like a big requirement. I'm like, decide, oh my gosh, I don't know what that was. I don't know if my mind fabricated something, but it felt real enough. But I think at the end of the day, I finally have the life that I want, and I'm standing up for myself. And she's not just pursuing him as a love interest. There's other things within her life that she's trying to stand up for herself for. But I just thought that was so ridiculous. It was so ridiculous. So anyway, I do feel like there are some elements like what I was just touching on about how she's starting to recognize that she needs to live for herself a little bit more because she has kind of lived to make everybody else happy. She's been a people pleaser and she's trying to actually make sure that she embraces life and what she wants from it. So those aspects, I'm like, that's nice. But it was kind of a goofy story that, while I think the themes have depth, I don't think the execution of them really went as far into the depth as I would have liked. So it just kind of resulted in like a silly time, and that's all right. It was fine. Not my favorite, not my least favorite, but it was all right. I would be curious to know, for those of you that have read more of that author's works, are they all like that? I prefer stories where the characters maybe have a little bit more depth to them and that they are a little more flawed, both the main character and the love interest. I don't like the imbalance of the main character's like trying to figure everything out in life and then the love interest is just perfect and that works out. I don't know. That's not really... It feels a little reader insert where you can place yourself into the perspective of the character so that you also are like, I do need to take care of myself. I do need to embrace life. I do deserve a perfect man. That's not really my favorite. So anyway, the next book, I'm sad because I liked certain aspects of this book so much and I would recommend this book. But there's just a couple of tiny little things that I was like, why is this here? And the book would be A Winter in New York. The setup for this one is you have a young woman who, she didn't really know her father. Her mother has died pretty young. It was just kind of her and her mom. And in an effort to sort of feel close to her mom again after her mom's death, she moves to New York, a place where in her mom's youth, her mom had a lot of really wonderful memories, and so our character wants to try to visit the places her mother loved, and it's actually really touching and really sad. And as somebody who has lost a parent, I can resonate with that feeling of wanting to connect with them even after they're gone. So I really, really enjoyed that aspect of the story and the character. I also really loved that the main characters in this story are not really, really young. That's a thing in a lot of fantasy stories we talk about, is that even in adult fantasy, a lot of the perspectives still feel like sort of coming of age, or at the very least, even if they're not, it's not a young adult book, and maybe the characters themselves aren't teenagers, they're still fitting within the themes of coming of age type of stories. And sometimes you just want to have a character that you're like, you've been through some stuff, and that provides a different level of connection. So I appreciated that within this romance story, while I'm not incredibly well read with romance whatsoever, thus far a fair amount of the ones I've picked up do not have characters that are in their 30s or coming up on their 40s. So I really liked that the main character and the love interest fit within that age bracket and the various aspects of what often comes with falling within that age. So as an example, the love interest in the story is actually a widow. He lost his wife a number of years ago, and now it's just him and his daughter. So I was like, a love interest with a teenage daughter. Like, I really liked that aspect of the story. And it creates a very real, how do I describe this? There are things about romance stories that it feels like we are living in this fantasy land, not literally fantasy books. I mean that there's, it feels like we're existing outside of real life because there are no additional obstacles in the way of these two characters falling in love. With this character, he having a daughter very much feels, and he has a really big family that he cares very much about. So he isn't the type that's going to want to go on the road and travel all the time and move to all these different places, and his career isn't something that is going to have him go to all these different places. He is very much connected to this little old gelato shop in New York City that's been a part of his family for years and years and years. And he's very connected to that. He cares about the business. He cares about his family. He cares about how it ties to the both of them. He very much cares about his daughter. So he's pretty stable, you could say. And he's comfortable with where he is. Whereas our other character doesn't really feel like she's had a lot of stability in her life. And she doesn't really know what it feels like to not only have that, but the stability that comes with a big family. Because it was always her and her mom against the world. She's kind of starting to experience a hint of stability in befriending this person. All of these aspects of the relationship building and the story, I was really liking. What I didn't end up loving, and what I kind of just have to sort of pretend like was hardly there, or I sort of revise it in my head, there are additional aspects where it felt like, you know how people have the whole third act breakup, that for some people it's handled really well, and for other people it's their biggest gripe about a story, where there's been something leading up, and then there's this big fight, or the characters break up, or there's something that gets in the way of them being together. And in this story, it felt incredibly forced, in my opinion. So I already feel like there were very natural things that didn't need additional drama to create tension. The main character not knowing what she wants for her life. Does she want to live in New York forever? Does she want to kind of take her roots here? What does she want in life, and does it necessarily 100% match with his life? Also, she's never really experienced stability. It's kind of scary. She doesn't know how to react to it. And then there is the element of, well, if I hurt him, I'm not just hurting him, I'm hurting his daughter, I'm hurting his family, because they're starting to embrace me. They don't know that the characters are seeing each other necessarily, but she is becoming very close with the family. So all of that feels very real. I personally do not think that there needed to be additional tension tied in, especially because the additional tension did not really, in my opinion, match a lot of the seriousness of a lot of the additional factors that were transpiring. So, as an example, the opening of the book, she is just really upset, the main character, and she goes to get this book at the bookstore, and right as she goes to get it, this man happens to grab that exact book. It's the last one, and she was really looking forward to it. She was having such a bad day. She's been having such a bad time of life because she's still mourning the loss of her mom, and she's mourning a relationship, and she is just, this sucks, right? Already, the whole bookshop, we reach for the last one, like, that's already a kind of cliche. So I'm like, okay, I can roll with this, but she's so rude and weird in this interaction because she's trying to convince the guy to give her the book, basically, but she can't just say, like, look, I know I don't know you, and I'm sure you have a really serious reason why you want that book, but I've just had the worst day. And life has just been really bad for me, and I was really looking forward to that. Is there any chance that you don't mind if I have it? Because maybe if he doesn't care that much, he can be like, yeah, go for it. But if he's like, I'm sorry, I also have a lot of reasons why I need to pick this book up. Luna's grumbling, by the way, if you hear loud sighing. But instead of doing like a normal thing, she's like just really condescending to him. She's like, oh, you probably should check out those Jack Reacher books. This is a part of a series. And he's like, aren't there a lot of books in that? And she's like, well, it's different because you can read like one at a time, but this is a part of a series. You really don't want to dive into it because you're probably not going to know what's happening. And I'm like, what's she doing? This is so rude. And then he just kind of like plays along, and then he makes it pretty clear that he indeed does know what's going on in this series, which she deserves. And then she tells him, well, I hope you and your wife, because I think it's Valentine's Day when this happens. She's like, well, I hope you and your wife have a good dinner or whatever. She's just like being weird and snarky. And he's like, oh, well, same to you and your husband. And then she's like, my husband's dead. And then he's like, oh, and he seems upset. And she's just like, whatever. And she just like leaves, and she's all upset. She's never this unbearable for the rest of the book. She never really talks about wanting to read or enjoying reading, or reading being a way that she escapes the difficulties of life. Like, it's not fitting of her character or the story or her interests and her hobbies and her personality. Like, she's pretty like chill for the most part. She gets emotional about things sometimes that are rooted in some of her trauma, which is very natural, but she's not like that. So it took a while for me to care about this character because it was so off-putting. Right after that, where she's like, my husband's dead, and he seems like so apologetic, and she just leaves, she then clues you in as the reader to the fact that, like, well, okay, to be fair, I was never married. I was with this guy, and he was really abusive, and I tell myself, like, he was emotionally abusive, and she tells herself that he's dead to kind of have a way to shut out that part of her life and the influence that he had. And she just didn't really feel like in this brief exchange with this person that she should clarify all of this. So she just kind of said it out of nowhere, figured, okay, well, I probably shouldn't have said that, but whatever, I'm never going to see that guy again. Okay, that's like kind of fair if you're like, I gave them the wrong impression, but it's a stranger in New York City. There's so many people here, it's fine. But who is it she runs into again 6 months later? That guy, and he recognizes her, and he's like, I felt so bad, I'm a widow too. And I'm like, didn't she also, though, like, kind of say something? But anyway, so she's like, oh. And instead of telling him, I gotta tell you something, I was in a bad mood that night, I snapped, I didn't actually lose a spouse, and I would never want you, if we are gonna, hang out more often, I don't want you to think that that's, like, what the heck? Why would she just be like, oh, Yeah. And you're like, what? No, no. Why would you let him believe? She lets him believe for months, for like so long. She lets this person believe that she too is a widow. And I'm like, why would you do that? And she thinks like, well, the longer the lie happens, the more I have to go with it. And he obviously cares about trust and being honest and having integrity, so I definitely can't tell him now. And I'm like, oh boy, okay, that's not a great, like, why did you I feel like that could have been resolved very quickly, right? I mean, that's the thing about a lot of books where you're like, open your mouth, and she could have just resolved it. That's not the only thing that she randomly decides to keep a secret. So the other conflict of the story, it's funny because I liked this book. You would think this is the one I'm ranting about, and it's not. But the other conflict of the story is that her mother, who was very much a character that was, her mother's life was so tragic, and you get a couple of flashback chapters for her mom, and they were so sad. But her mom didn't really have the chance to ever live life the way she wanted. She was in foster care, and she went from place to place, and she just kind of wants to figure out what she wants in life. You have, obviously, with the main character trying to have this closeness with her mother after death by going to the places her mom went to in her youth. One of the places was this gelato shop, and her mom has this gelato recipe written down on a napkin and has told the main character never share this recipe with anyone. And what do you know? The gelato shop that the love interest works at, it's his secret family recipe. It's been in their family for generations. It's part of what keeps their business afloat. It's a special gelato. But the person who currently, there's only ever 2 people at a time that know the recipe. And one of them is a flake in the family. The other person just recently had a stroke, and they don't remember it at the moment. And our main character knows the family recipe, and she's like, I can save this business. I can help these people. But also, I don't know how my mom came to have this, and I don't know what kind of drama that might start for this family. So I'm going to offer, because I am a chef, I'm going to offer to help them recreate this recipe. And a little bit, I'm like, can you help them recreate it faster? Like, I know I'm not a chef, and I don't know how long it takes to pin down exactly a recipe, but she has it, you know? And, like, they're questioning if they're gonna have to shut down the business. They don't know what they're gonna do. And I'm like, you can help that. Like, it takes so long. It takes so long, and she just kind of keeps not really telling them exactly. She's, like, trying to steer them in the right direction. And that to me was a little forced and a little silly. And on top of all of that, there is a little bit of drama with how her mom came to have this recipe. And it would be kind of like this big reveal and secret for the love interest's family, like a secret they don't really want to have revealed. And so one of the characters in the family basically pulls like this mafia, you gotta leave the city because I can't have you ruining my family by revealing this secret. And so I was like, oh, okay, again, there's some really real world tension already established in just like the nature of trying to have your life and your family fit with someone else's. And we're adding in all these other things that I was like, this is getting a little silly. So it's funny because the parts that were great were, I thought, so well done that's why I still would recommend this. But as I said before, I kind of am a little bit like rewriting some of it of just like, yeah, I would have cut that. I don't think we need this. You wouldn't think it, but that has been my second favorite of the books that I've picked up. Really quick, I want to let you know about the book I have started and have yet to complete about the dumbest character that ever was. And that book would be One Day in December. And this follows a very unlikable, stupid person who is sitting at a bus. She's sitting in a bus, and she looks out the window, and she sees a handsome man, not perfect, but attractive in a way that is just so exciting. And she looks at him, and she's like, oh my gosh, I have experienced love at first sight. And I think he has too, because it looks like he's going to get on the bus. Oh my gosh. And then he doesn't get on the bus in time, and she's like, no. And then she spends months of her life looking for this man, crying that she hasn't found him, deciding maybe I'm gonna write off love for forever and just have my best friend and we'll raise cats together and I'll just keep searching for him because if it's not him, I don't want anybody. And I'm like, okay, what is this person? So already I'm like, well, okay, this is actual delusion. What is going on? And then she says some questionable things. This is why I thought, all right, I gotta get the tabs out because already I feel like this premise could work if it was acknowledged and there was a huge level of self-awareness of like how ridiculous this is, of this character being like, I don't know what to tell you, but I really hope I see that guy again. And then jokingly, like, because she does in this book, this character recruits her best friend to help her find this guy. They like scope out bars and look, and anytime they see a guy that looks attractive but then he starts making out with his girlfriend, she's all like distraught again, and you're like, okay. But anyway, so if though instead of having it be this emotional breakdown every time it's not that guy, if instead it was like, you want to go out to eat tonight? Oh, maybe we'll find Prince Charming finally. Like if it was kind of like, I'm keeping my eye out because I don't know, I just felt something. It felt like the universe wanted us together. Whatever, but I feel like without there being that campiness and silliness, and instead, like, am I supposed to take this horribly stupid woman seriously? Because I don't. I hate her. She's awful, and she has... Okay, here's another example of her being awful. She thinks at one point how she has a very fast metabolism, and she has... You can already predict where this is going, I'm sure. But she has a very fast metabolism, but she's young, and someday when her metabolism isn't working great anymore, she's gonna be a goner. And I'm like, yeah, of course, because I don't know if you know, a woman's worth is based in how much space she takes up. The less space, the higher her worth. If she happens to take up more space, she's not worth anything anymore. I'm like, what is this? What is this? And then she also... thinks about how her friend, who's perfect and so beautiful, oh my gosh, and I just love her so much. So she thinks about her beautiful friend and how her beautiful friend isn't the best at setting her up with people. And she does still try to go on these dates with these guys that her friend tries to set her up with. And one guy's biggest fault was pretty much that he was Scottish. And I was like, what? She just thinks I couldn't even understand half of what he was saying. And she says it so judgmentally. And I was like, okay, that doesn't mean that he's not a good guy. What is this? So she's put off by the fact that this one guy is just so Scottish. And then the other guy that she thought was unlikable, she found him unlikable because he seemed like somebody who just loved exercise. And he apparently kind of questioned anytime she was looking at the menu and considering getting a certain meal that would take more than an hour to burn off. Okay, so she doesn't like when people are critical of, you know, okay, so yeah, that sounds annoying. That definitely sounds annoying. So she thinks that's very unlikable of this guy to be doing this. And then she thinks, and I don't normally sleep with people on the first date, but I just felt like I owed it to my friend. And I'm like, what? What? I'm not kidding, because I was listening to the audiobook for this, and I rewound that passage at least 3 times, because I was like, there's no way that she decided to sleep with a guy because she felt like she owed it to her friend. Because I'm like, does your friend care? What the heck? Also, if your friend is like, I want to set you up with someone, but I'm going to be really mad at you if you don't sleep with them. I'm like, that's a bad friend. What is this friendship? What? This is so dumb. This is so dumb. You want to know the big conflict of the story? Because we haven't even gotten there. I know thus far you're like, the conflict is that this woman might be the worst woman to ever exist who hasn't committed any atrocities. But that's not the conflict. The conflict is that this perfect man that she saw from the bus window is now dating her best friend. Dun, dun, dun. So I don't know what's going to happen next. That's where I'm at in the story. And I'll let you know. But I can tell you already, it's not going to go up from here. I just know it. I mean, maybe she'll become less terrible, but I'm like, it's a pretty big hill to climb. And I don't know that at the top the views are going to be worth it. I think we're going to get to the top and be like, oh shoot, this is a giant trash heap. Turns out the view is of nothing. That's One Day in December so far, even though I'm barely into it. I'll let you know as we go. Luna Bear, why don't you just come inside? Luna? Luna, it's late. Do you want a snacky? Yeah. Alright. Okay, come here. Yeah, I'm coming. Do you miss your dad, Luna Bear? Yeah. Dad gives the best belly rubs, huh? What? You're a silly girl. Love you. Yeah, that's a happy girl. Okay, let's conclude our thoughts on One Day in December. I will from there segue into talking about the remaining 2 books that I read for this, which would be Kiss Her Once for Me and The Holiday Swap. But let's conclude, as I said, the thoughts for One Day in December. I believe we left off with what the main conflict turned out to be, which is that our main character, no, our main character, she has discovered that this boy she fell in love with while looking out the window on a bus is now dating her best friend after a year of hoping she would run into him and that serendipity would occur. It did not. Her friend's dating him and she's like, oh no. She immediately thinks to herself, I can't let him know I saw him at that bus stop. She knows that she has hyped this person up to her friend, and her friend has been nice and supportive about this delusion of hers. If it comes back around to the friend, okay, I understand that in that scenario, now her friend's gonna know, hey, this guy I was pining over and have been fantasizing about for the past year, it turns out it's the guy you're dating. And okay, fine. But he also, because you get his perspective, he's like, well, this is awkward because I remember seeing that girl when I was standing at the bus stop, and you're like, okay, these people have great memories. I mean, his memory is noted in the book to be very, very good, so he has a reason. Her, though, I'm like, how was it so burned into your brain how this man looks, unless you have, I always want to say a photogenic memory. It's photographic. Unless you have a photographic memory, which basically he does, but she doesn't. So I feel like she should be kind of unsure because you saw him for a half a second a year ago through a foggy bus window. I'm never going to get over that this is the premise for the book. If I had known this was the premise of the book, I probably would have been like, oh, that's not for me. But because I went into all of these without knowing, here we are. Anyway, I'll push past the fact the premise of the book is a little out there. But he recognizes to catch you up, oh, this is the woman that I saw at the bus. Okay, well, I really like how things are going with Sarah. Sarah's the friend's name. He's like, so I don't want to mess this up. Just play it cool. And I'm like, why is this weird for him? He doesn't have these feelings that have developed, except, he clues you into the fact that he has often a night woken up ready to go, fantasizing about this woman. And he notes how attractive he finds his girlfriend, Sarah, the friend, and he's obviously been in a relationship with her for a little bit by the time the friend introduces him to the main character. So I'm just like, all right, man, I don't know, like, get a better imagination, I guess. Whatever. That's the stupid thing to be annoyed by. He can fantasize about whoever he wants, I suppose, including women on buses. Anywho, so I'm gonna get into spoilers for the book from here on out. If you don't want to know what transpires, you want to pick this book up for yourself, then you can skip ahead. But I'm going to let you know what happens. Can you guess what happens when a man who is fantasizing about this woman while dating her best friend, and she finds herself hopelessly in love with this man. Can you guess what happens? Oh, you probably did. He cheats on his girlfriend, aka the main character's best friend, with her because there's a night where she's really distraught and really stressed out because not so long ago her father had a health incident. He is currently okay but recovering. Life has just really changed for her mom. Our character is stressed all the time though, which is very relatable and very understandable, and she's feeling emotional and vulnerable, and he comforts her, and then he basically makes out with her and immediately is like, we can't ever talk about this. He says to her, like, when he when he tells her that, because they're really close together and they're almost about to kiss, and he just says, I can't kiss you. And you're like, okay, you're right, you shouldn't kiss her because you're dating her best friend. But anyway, then he runs after her because she's like, I'm sorry, and she's all flustered, and she runs outside in the snow, and he runs after her, and he's like, can I tell you something? But you have to promise not to tell a single soul. You can't even tell a goldfish. And I'm like, this is not the time for this stupid, I guess, joke. I don't know, but I was like, okay, just whatever. And she's like, oh, what? And he's like, I really wanted to kiss you back there. And then he kisses her anyway. So I'm like, why would you? What's the point of not kissing her the first time? I hate these two characters so much that I am being critical of pretty much everything they do because they are both awful. I thought that the main character was going to be my downfall, but it turns out the guy, such a jerk. I'm filtering myself. He's awful. I didn't think he could trump her, but he does, because at least the main character over the course of the rest of the events of the book kind of has character growth. Does he? No. He spirals into becoming one of the most unlikable characters that I have encountered. And it's frustrating because I actually feel like a lot of things that the author did in this book could have been fantastic. I think so much of the book could have been about the way that we romanticize these concepts, this idea of love at first sight, or this is my soulmate, or the one that got away. We romanticize these things to a point of being destructive, because throughout the rest of the book, you do see both these characters participate in destructive behavior, and eventually they're trying to pick up the pieces and somewhat learn from it, except for the end of the book is these two finally getting together after a lot of stuff happens, like the main character getting married and then almost cheating on her husband with him. She doesn't quite, but she almost. So let's get back though to this place where he cheats on Sarah. So the main character, she's like, okay, yeah, we can't tell her because if we tell her, all we're going to be doing is assuaging our guilt, and that's selfish. So let's never tell Sarah because it's also never going to happen again. He's like, yeah, exactly. And then in her New Year's resolution, she's like writing out to herself, because every year you get her New Year's resolutions, and she says something about, like, I can't tell anybody, not even a goldfish. She says something like that in her New Year's resolution. I'm like, I don't think you feel that bad. They decide we're never going to tell Sarah. Sarah deserves better. He keeps dating Sarah, and she realizes, I need a new fresh start because my life is a mess in so many ways, and I'm upset with myself for ever allowing myself to fall behind in my career, to become so obsessed with this guy, to hurt my friend even though she doesn't know it. So I need to work on myself. So she goes on this find myself trip, basically, where she's relaxing and she's trying to sort of recover from all the stress of life. And while on this trip, she meets this nice guy named Oscar. They hit it off. And then when they come back, they're trying to now stay together while going back to quote unquote real life. You recognize right away that given that her family is more middle class, you could say, and his family is very much, they're very wealthy. And they also are very judgmental of people that don't have money. He's not so much, but his family absolutely is. And you can see pretty quickly that they're going to have some conflicts as a result of this. But regardless, they genuinely seem like they care about each other. She introduces him to Sarah and Bus Guy, and because they're still together, it's been a really long time. And her friend is so nice. She's always so supportive, and she's always saying, oh my gosh, yay, I'm so happy for you. He seems so nice. He seems like he's genuinely trying, and we should have double dates, and we should get together. This is going to be so fun. I'm so happy. She's so supportive, and not just in the dating area. She's supportive of the main character all the time. And the main character's name, they call her Lou a lot of times. That's her nickname. And the love interest's name, which I hate to even call him that, his name is Jack. So I'm going to start using their names from here on out. So I'm not saying the protagonist, the bus guy, Jack. He's just a jerk to her new boyfriend immediately. And Sarah is telling him, what's wrong with you? What's going on? Even Lou kind of confronts him and tells him, what are you doing? You're being terrible to him. And he is really defensive and rude at first, and then he realizes, oh, this is important to her, and he's like, okay, sorry, I'll back off. Events occur. Life kind of keeps going, and things are building with Oscar, and things are going well. Jack and Sarah, you can see, are rocky, which are like big surprise to no one. Jack and Sarah break up. Oh no. Part of why this occurs is because not only were they starting to drift apart, but Jack ended up experiencing the lowest of the lows in his life, where he, in his career, has been trying to become really a well-known name in radio. Part of being good at this is you have to have decent hearing, and he ends up getting in a car accident, and he does have physical injuries outside of his hearing, but he does end up losing his hearing in one ear almost entirely. He was right between switching jobs where he was going to quit at his current place of work, and he pretty much had it in the bag. He was going to start working at this other place. It was going to be a big step up, but as a result of this car accident, not only was he replaced at the job he'd been at, but then the job he was going to get ended up going to someone else, and so he is pretty much having to start over, and he does not start over well at all. And I kind of respected that the author was willing to show how horrible of a person someone can be when they truly are at their lowest, because the girlfriend, Sarah, at this point, they're not broken up, and Sarah's trying to be there for him and to take care of him, but without it being really spoken aloud, it's pretty clear that they were already rocky, so now she feels almost like she has to take care of him because now's not the time to break up with him, and she feels guilty, but also he's so unbearable. He's so cruel to her. She doesn't know what to do. So she has to go away for a little bit, and she asks our main character, Lou, can you stop in and see how he's doing, and maybe if it's coming from you, it will help him get on his feet. Maybe he just needs somebody besides me. And she's like, okay, sure, yeah, I'll stop by. And when she stops by, he is saying all sorts of horrendous things to her. He then tries to kiss her, and she's like, what are you doing? Because it's been years, and at this point, they've not really had anything happening since what happened when he cheated with her by kissing her. And he starts telling her, oh, so what's the difference now? Now that I need comfort, you won't reciprocate, but I was there for you. And she's like, what the heck? That's not even close to the same. And he's telling her, yeah, it's not the same because before you were the person receiving the comfort, but you're too selfish to comfort me. And I'm like, okay, what the heck? Sorry, my foot is falling asleep. He's thinking throughout this whole situation, like, what am I doing? I don't mean any of this. Why am I saying this? But he's not stopping himself. So I'm like, am I supposed to feel bad for you because you feel bad in your head? Because I don't. Why would you? What is wrong with you? And again, I respect that the author is willing to show what an awful human he's being, but he takes it pretty far, where she has this little necklace of a starfish because her and her boyfriend Oscar, when they first met, that was his nickname for her, and they met in this really beautiful location. They were on the beach all the time, and so he has this little necklace that he got her, and Jack grabs her necklace and rips it off, and she's genuinely afraid of him at this point. And then she leaves because she's saying, I'm not gonna deal with this. I can't help you. She's really shaken up, understandably, because he came pretty close to just attacking her and kind of assaulting her in this moment. And he makes it up to her by buying her some flowers. Also, he buys Sarah flowers and tells her, like, I'm sorry I've been such a loser, basically, and I'm gonna be better, I promise. And he does try to pick himself back up from there. There's never really more shown on page besides him going to get flowers and being like, yeah, the flower lady probably thinks I'm a jerk because I'm buying 2 separate sets of flowers for 2 different women to tell them sorry, but whatever, she doesn't know me. And I'm just, baffled by this man being as horrible as he is. And I keep, as I'm reading, I'm like, is this a romance? Is it actually going to do something really interesting? And I think bold, potentially, which would be to show how, as I said before, you can get so caught up in looking through these rose-tinted glasses that when you actually take them off, you realize, I don't think we ever actually had anything. I built you into some ideal, and I was reaching for that ideal. And in actuality, you are not even close to the thing I built up in my head. And it's made me worse as a person, as I think it has for you, because I think you've done the same. None of that. Because she marries Oscar, catching us back up to this. She marries Oscar. Sarah and Jack come to terms with the fact that they were rocky before the accident. They've been rocky ever since. They're going to part ways. She ends up going on to have a happy life. And she's got a great career. And she ends up being with this man who adores her, and you're like, okay, good. Sarah deserves that, because Sarah's awesome. But meanwhile, he decides, kind of similar to what happened before with Lou, where she thought, I'm not on the right trajectory in my life. I need to start fresh. He decides he's going to do that. He moves, he gets a new job, and they kind of have distance, all of them, Jack, Sarah, and Lou. They all have a little bit of distance between the three of them at this point because they're all moving on with life. But Sarah comes back into town when it is Lou's wedding. There's 2 days until the wedding, and they're playing this little game about what random stats are associated with weddings or love. And one of the questions ends up being, how many times in your life have you been in love? And Lou says, twice, I guess. And Sarah says, really? Wait, who is the second person? And then Lou realizes, like, oh, shoot, I can't tell her it was Jack. So she says, my college boyfriend, I guess. And then Sarah is like, wait, no, because you were absolutely head over heels in love with that random bus guy. So you've been in love 3 times. And then she's like, oh, yeah, ha. And then she's like, why are you being weird? Wait a second, whatever. Did you ever meet him? And suddenly she's like all excited, like, oh my gosh, why didn't you tell me? You met him, didn't you? And she's like, Sarah, please, just leave this alone. Leave it alone. And I'm like, you could not act any more suspicious in this scenario. But also, what is suspicious about this, right? Like, no normal person would be like, wait a second, huh? What's going on? I feel like this whole scenario is very forced. Anyway, so she is being all weird, and Sarah's like, what the heck? What's going on? Why won't you tell me? And she's like, just stop, please, just stop. And then Sarah goes, oh my God, it was Jack. How would she know it was Jack? Come on, how? And also, if she was willing to lie, if Lou was willing to lie and say, yeah, the second person, I guess, was my college boyfriend. She was willing to lie right then and there. And I'm not advocating for lying, but I'm like, you know, I just never understand in stories when characters are willing to tell one lie, but then they're like, they can't keep going with some other lie. Lie for longer. Lie for longer. What's going on? And it's because you know there's going to be some big falling out. You've been waiting for it to happen. It's been years of the book going by. And so she's like, just drop it, just drop it. Sarah somehow deduces that it's Jack. And she's like, oh my God, you've been in love with Jack? Wow, okay, so was it fun? Were the two of you behind my back just laughing at me? And she's like, what? No, of course not. And she's like, was it fun sleeping with my boyfriend? Well, and she's kind of jumping to the conclusions here, but she was right the first time, so I guess let's keep going. She's like, I never slept with Jack. And then she has such a hyper-specific question. She's like, you're telling me you never once kissed him? And then she's like, okay, one time. And she's like, I've had enough. And she leaves. Our main character is so distressed because it's her best friend. And she just gave her this really heartfelt, emotional gift, because you do find out over the course of the story that when our main character was very little, she lost her sister. And so as a way to basically say, I love you, you're my sister, you're a part of my family, this is my most treasured possession. I think it's a piece of jewelry if I'm remembering correctly, like a pendant. She asks Sarah, can I give this to you? Because this is how much you mean to me. It's nice. It's a nice moment. And Sarah initially accepts until this big reveal. And then Sarah wants nothing to do with her because she feels like, wow, okay, I guess our friendship isn't what I thought it was. Our main character's distraught. She's now having to try and pick up the pieces and get ready for her wedding. And mind you, as you're leading up to the wedding, you as the reader can sense this isn't going to go well because she's obviously still in love with Jack. And she also, which by the way, for what reason, I don't know. But they trauma bonded, I guess, because his dad died not so long ago, and she lost her sister, which I'm not trying to say people don't bond through shared experiences. But that's all they have, I guess. And also, that one time at the bus. Regardless, she is like, okay, even though I'm ignoring signs of the fact that his family, especially his mom, Oscar's mom, her fiance, even though she seems to look down on me, and even though the mom seems weirdly in love with his ex-girlfriend, even through those things, and also the fact that clearly money is an issue, and he seems to care a lot about his career, and maybe he prioritizes his career to a point that I don't necessarily want in a relationship, but also we're in love, so it's fine. And I will add again that I kind of appreciate the inclusion of that because it is very realistic to the ways that sometimes marriages you can kind of sense if you're an objective third party or somebody in hindsight can look back and realize, okay, yeah, I think if I had really asked myself the tough questions, I would have seen that we weren't maybe compatible and that maybe marriage wasn't going to work out for us. But in the moment, I felt so in love. I thought that love would conquer all, and they don't ask those tough questions. So I kind of appreciated the inclusion of that because it is a real world thing that occurs for a lot of people. But it is still frustrating because you're like, except for I'm reading a romance. So I don't think that this is going to be the thematic element here. I think it's just like another thing in the way, keeping her from being with Jack. She goes to her wedding. She gets married. I kept thinking that when she would go to the altar and she would see Jack, that she would realize, like, I can't do this. Or because she does panic before she gets married when she's trying on a dress and somebody says, like, oh, the man of your dreams is going to love seeing you in this. And then she panics because when she thinks man of her dreams, she still instinctively thinks of Jack, not Oscar. And this, as a result, has had her panicking. And I kind of thought as she was walking down the aisle or as she was going to say her vows that it would dawn on her, I can't do this. It doesn't. And then I'm kind of thinking, well, maybe when she goes to sign, maybe she'll be like, I can't do this. And she doesn't. And she gets married. And then there's the reception where Sarah was supposed to give this big speech. And Sarah's not there, though. So, oh my gosh, the wedding's falling apart. And my new husband's mother is so particular about everything. And this is going to ruin everything. And then Jack steps up to the occasion. And he doesn't really know what to say because, he wasn't expecting this, but he gives the most heartfelt, beautiful message or speech or whatever. So he says really nice things about her and how she's like the most wonderful person and everybody's life is better and he feels like his life is better as a result of he says all these things and he has a date at this wedding and the date gets super pissed off because the date's like, you might as well have just slept with her in front of everybody, which was kind of funny. The wedding occurs and then our main character is married. And then Sarah is off living with her boyfriend in Australia. And Jack is just, he got a job working at a radio station and he's doing all right for himself. And he keeps dating all these gorgeous women because somehow this loser has game, I guess. And then life kind of continues on. Again, you can see where the tracks are going to go off the cliff because Oscar is telling Lou, I think I'm going to get this promotion. It does mean I'm going to be gone for about half the week, though, every week. And she's saying, that's kind of a lot. We just started our marriage. And he tells her, I know, but once I get the promotion, things will calm down. Do things calm down? No. He keeps getting offered more and more opportunities, and he keeps wanting to take those opportunities. And they keep robbing him of time with Lou, which isn't really cool with her, but she's not really speaking up for herself, what she wants, what she feels like they need for their marriage. She's not really saying any of this. And then her dad dies, which was really sad. And as somebody has lost their dad, that part really, I feel, was actually well executed. In her case, it was very sudden and abrupt, but just that feeling of, Dad, are you okay, Dad? That whole scene, I was like, that's very realistic. And she is broken at this event. Of course, her mother, they had been together since they were, I think, in high school, the mom and the dad. So now the mom is not doing the best. And is Oscar really there for her? Not so much. Jack calls her. And okay, Jack doesn't call her. I should say he receives a call from her because she doesn't know who else to call. Jack has lost his father. So he's the first person that she calls when she needs comfort. And the way the scene is done really bugged me because he's in the middle of being intimate, basically, with his new girlfriend. And it's describing the fact that what the girlfriend's doing to him when he's seeing his phone buzz. And then when he sees it's Lou, he has to answer. And I just feel like this is a little lazy because it's almost like he loves her so much, he's willing to interrupt sex to answer a call from her. That's how much he loves her. I don't know. It was kind of gross to me. But anyway, he answers the phone and he's telling her, like, it's okay, sweetheart, you're going to be all right. You know, I'm here for you. It's okay. And he's saying all these things while his girlfriend's just waiting in the other room for him to come back to what they were doing. And I just thought that scene was disturbing. There's a plane flying overhead. He ends up being there for her and comforting her. And she is starting to question things about what she wants in life and what she has with Oscar. Eventually, she's kind of starting to get back to life. It is very difficult for her after the loss of her father and everything with her family. But Oscar ends up telling her that he has another promotion coming and that he is wanting to take it. She is now saying, I don't know, I could really use you and I would really like to be able to see you more often. And he tells her about how his ex-girlfriend, the one that the mother loves because she also is upper class, he was telling Lou that this woman has told him that she wants to have an arrangement where he can be married but also hook up with her on the side. And she's like, what? No. So are you saying you've been sleeping with her? And he's like, I haven't done anything. Jeez. And you're like, okay. But still. And she's like, why are you telling me this? No, I don't want you to have this relationship with this woman. And she's kind of thinking to herself, is he going to anyway? I don't know. And he is like, I don't want that either. I just was letting you know. And you're like, were you just letting her know? Or were you kind of hoping she'd say yes? But anyway, so he tells her this. He really is not there for her at all when her dad dies. Then the next day or shortly after having this weird conversation about, I feel like there's distance between us, my ex-girlfriend who also works with me pretty much full-time, which he didn't really disclose that information before. She wants to hook up on the side, but okay, yeah, I'm not cool with that either. And it sounds like you're not cool with it, so all right. Right after that, he tells her, I think we should try to have a baby. And she says, yeah, I know you're trying to make things work. And I know she's a very amicable person. She's relatively nice and she's a bit of a people pleaser. But oh my gosh, don't have a baby. What are you doing? Don't try to have a baby, right? Like, and also I'm not trying to be judgmental of anybody's decision to have a child. I'm just saying it's so weird. It was so weird in this scenario of you're never here. No, I would prefer if you didn't hook up with your ex-girlfriend / coworker. Yeah, let's have a baby. It was just such a strange leap. And again, you can see doom painted in bright neon colors on the wall. And you're like, how are you thinking that the solution to all your problems is to have a kid? But for I think the third time in this play-by-play of this book, it is realistic. There are people that feel like maybe if we have a family, that'll bring us together. And it ends up creating a difficult environment for the children to grow up in because the parents were trying to use the children to fix something that wasn't anything to do with that child's life. And then those poor kids grow up sometimes thinking that they're the reason that there's that fracture. And anyway, so it is realistic. So again, I appreciate the inclusion of it from the perspective of this is the kind of behavior that people partake in. And this is how relationships go in directions where initially it looks so perfect, but behind the scenes, there's things going on. So I liked all of those things, except for, again, it always just felt like a way to keep the two of them apart. She is thinking, well, he has said that if he gets his promotion, then things will probably work out better and we can be a family and then we'll have a baby and things will be great. And then he tells her that he got the job. Oh, but also that means that they're going to have to move. And she tells him, I don't want to move. My job is here. And he kind of accidentally is very belittling because he's like, yeah, but, you know, you weren't really going to work, right? I mean, your job. Basically, he is not straight out saying this, but he is essentially implying, yeah, but your job is nothing and mine's everything. So why? And she tells him, okay, but were you thinking I would just say yes to that? Because I care about this. I like my job. Did you think I was just going to quit? And he's like, well, why wouldn't you? I make a ton of money. You can just be at home with the baby. And she's like, okay, I don't. And I'm like, yeah, you should have had these conversations before. And I was like, please, please don't actually have a baby, because do not use a baby to keep these two characters from being together. That would drive me up a wall. Or have like Jack come in and now be this kid's dad or something. I'm like, please don't. Thankfully, they don't have a baby. What they do realize they need is a divorce. So they split up. And this is really when she's like, wow, I'm divorced. I never thought I would be divorced. I really cared about this man. I tried. And she did. I think she genuinely tried. It's just they really weren't on the same page, and what they wanted from life was different. And they do have an agreement. Like, they understand, yeah, this isn't going to be some kind of messy disaster, drama-filled split. I think we both realize what's needed for us, and it's not each other. So they split up. You're like, oh, so are her and Jack gonna finally get together? Well, Jack has a hot girlfriend currently, so no, not yet. So she's single. She's trying to make it work being single. And her and Sarah, they run into each other again, and they're starting to restore their friendship. So you're like, oh, that's nice. They're friends again. That's good. They're starting to be there for each other. Sarah is really actually, as she always has been, supportive of her as she is getting divorced, and she's trying to be there for her, which is nice. So from there, we see Lou trying to pick up herself. You see Sarah and her are having their friendship again. Jack's hot girlfriend. Let's talk about her. She's cool. She's a cool character, but I feel like we played that card a little bit of when there's a woman in the way of two characters getting together, we just have to nitpick. Even if it's sort of like subtle nitpicking and we're not blatantly saying it, we're kind of just dismissing anything about her. So as an example, she's, what's it called when you only eat fish as your meat, but you don't eat other meat? Pescatarian. I always want to say Presbyterian. I'm like, that's not the same thing, which reminds me. Anybody remember when I said Anne Frank instead of Lisa Frank in a video earlier this year? Pescatarian. That's what she is. And she's at this event, and Jack is there, Lou is there, and the event does not have dietary restrictions within the menu, even though you could have filled out a card that said if any guests had dietary restrictions. Jack, being the sucky boyfriend that he is, he was like, oh, whoops, I forgot. Or he wasn't dating her just yet, something like that. But he forgot about the fact that there wasn't going to be something for his girlfriend to eat, because all the food that they have, I think, is mostly meat that's not fish. And she's cool with it. She's like, oh, it's fine. It's no big deal. And there is this kind of undercurrent, though, of like, pescatarians, am I right? And you're like, no, you're not. She's nice, and she's not bothering anybody. She's not like announcing to the whole room and ruining the whole event by being like, all of you are terrible for not eating the same as. She's not doing anything. She's just polite. And she's like, no, it's fine. It's cool. Don't worry about it. She's chill. She's also very attractive. She's an actress. She's like got a cool look. And even Lou thinks like she seems cool. Like she seems like a cool person. Lou's not weird with her at all. It's the way that Jack thinks about her. So Jack has this like, I mean, she's an actress, and she's like definitely really hot, she's my hot girlfriend. I think he even likes the fact that she doesn't have noticeable tan lines. That's one of the things he likes about her. You're like, cool, man. I'm glad that her as a person means nothing to you, I guess. There's another part where he's going over to her place to eat, and she, just in general, likes for people to take off their shoes when they come into her house. And he has this thought as he thinks something like, I've personally always found that pretty off-putting. And I'm like, dude, why are you so annoying? I don't understand. It is so incredibly common for so many people and a lot of cultures to take off your shoes when you come into someone else's home, which, by the way, you're going into their house. It's not your house. And it's not a big deal. They're asking you to take off your shoes. they're not asking you to do some great feat in order to prove that you deserve to be within the walls of their home. They're not asking anything crazy. And also, I don't know, I prefer not having my shoes on. It's not a weird ask. Do you also get upset when people don't want your shoes on the bed? Are you one of those people? I'm just like, why do you hate your girlfriend? And why do you suck? Why do you suck so much? Just take your shoes off, you idiot. So anyway, he just has all these like little nitpicky things about his girlfriend. You're like, just break up. Just break up. And they've been together for a while, and she keeps kind of hinting like, I kind of want to get married. I kind of want to get engaged. I feel like we're going nowhere, and I kind of want to move things along. And he keeps finding ways to avoid it. And she finally is like, propose to me now. And he's like, I don't think this is the time. Let's go home. She's like, propose. And he's like, oh. And she's like, I'm not going to wait around for you to figure out that you're in love with someone else, because she can tell. So she breaks things off with him, and you're like, cool. Kind of weird, though, that it was like an ultimatum. But also, I get that you saw it, and I feel like by putting him on the spot, it really highlighted that he isn't that into you. So they break up. He still can't just bring himself to let Lou know that he's in love with her or really open his mouth like an adult, which at this point he is an adult, but will he open his mouth? No. So he keeps just being himself. And there's a line about how he just hooks up with women even if he doesn't really like them. In fact, sometimes he doesn't like them at all, and he hooks up with them and everything's empty and meaningless. But Lou, he really always loved Lou. So he stops hooking up with random hot women. And there's a night where he is doing his radio show, and Lou calls in, but she says she's someone. She gives a different name. And she starts saying basically their beginning, their origin, where she's saying, well, do you believe in first love at first sight or whatever? I don't know. She's basically revealing that it's her without saying her name. And she's saying, like, do you believe that maybe there's a chance and that even through the mistakes that two people can come back together? And the way he's talking to her on air, it's very clear that he knows her and that she's talking about him and he is talking about himself in responding to her. And so everybody at the station's like, whoa, what the heck? This sleazebag actually might have a heart? Listeners everywhere are like, oh my gosh, find this woman. Who's this woman? And she ends up going down to his place of work, and she gets in, and he's in the middle of finishing up one of his radio shows. And when he finishes up the show, he looks up and she's there. And then they kiss, and that's the end of the book. That's the end of the book. I was like, what? You had so much potential to do interesting things by studying human behavior and relationships and self-destructiveness, and instead you turned it into a finally they can be together, love at first sight conquers all. It conquered nothing. They suck. These characters suck. And ironically, through all of my ranting, I would read something else by this author if the focus wasn't we have to have a happily ever after. And I'm not saying it had to end in tragedy for me to like it, but the thematic elements that could have been present that I've been discussing throughout the course of this, those things kind of went out the window when all we were aiming toward was, yay, they smooched. Like, that's not a great ending. It's not. It's in my opinion, I feel that it negated a lot of the work it feels like we could have been doing, because instead of it feeling like we were attempting to showcase the ways that human beings actually act, the decisions they make, and how it can be clearly flawed from an objective third party, but when you're in it, it's hard to remove yourself from the equation and really ask yourself the tough questions and really make sure that you're the best version of yourself, and that then you can show up to be the best person for someone else in your life. But if that best version of yourself and the other person aren't compatible, then maybe, all those things. Instead of being a study in all of that, it had to end up making all of the events of her life just be something to get in the way of her and Bus Guy. It's so frustrating. It was so frustrating. I don't know when the last time is that I ranted for that long, but I still have 2 more books to talk about, so I'm not going to go as in-depth with these next 2. They're quite different from both each other and from Kiss Her Once for Me. That was the name of it. No, One Day in December. Kiss Her Once for Me is the one I liked. Sorry. The Holiday Swap. Let's talk about that one. The Holiday Swap is the most Hallmark book of the 5 that I've talked about here. So it follows these 2 sisters. They're twins. And one of them has this successful show, and it's a baking show. And she has this horrible coworker, and they're competing for a new job. And depending on how this lead up until Christmas goes, that is likely going to determine who gets the next job. And her coworker sucks, but he obviously tries to manipulate situations to make things look bad for her and make himself look good. And she is just so frustrated with it, but she's determined. And she's like, I'm not going to let this loser get in my way. So she's trying really hard. At the beginning of the story, there's an accident where this really heavy pot falls onto her head and she has a concussion. And as a result of her concussion, she can no longer taste. And that's obviously a huge issue for this baking show. So she calls up her twin and says, hey, I know this is a lot to ask. Can you take my place and pretend to be me? And I'll run the family bakery, because she knows the recipes by heart. She doesn't really need to use taste for the bakery. And her sister's like, wow, that's kind of a big ask, but okay, I'll do anything for you because you're my sister. And also because we're twins, and when you hit your head, I already felt something. And I'm like, that's not how being a twin works. They swap places. And what do you know? While they're pretending to be each other, they each fall in love. That's kind of the uh-oh, what do we do now? Because this person thinks they've fallen in love with my sister. And what was frustrating about this book is I kind of understand the one sister who has the baking show, the one who has taken her place. I get why she can't really reveal to everybody, oh, actually, I'm not her, because the whole point is that she's trying to make sure that her sister gets this job. Wouldn't really look good if the sister dipped just to have her twin replace her. And also that would probably cause some mistrust with management and things like that. So you're like, okay, I get why you have to keep it to yourself. But the one running the family bakery, every now and then someone will come in, and I feel like you can just be like, hey, I'm actually the other one. The lie goes on for way too long, but also I didn't really feel like how the lie was resolved and the consequences of it, there really weren't any. It was like the women built up, oh my gosh, it's going to be such a big deal when I reveal that it's not actually me. And it wasn't. It wasn't at all. Everybody was fine with it because it was kind of cookie cutter, vanilla. Everything has to be really sweet and nice. And even people that are annoying, except for the annoying coworker aside from him, even they kind of come around in the end to being, actually, everybody's just so good and nice. And I'm not trying to poke fun at hopeful stories or stories that are showcasing people that aren't infinitely flawed. But I did find that this book, I liked it initially because I was enjoying all the descriptions about the baking, and I was liking the exploration of these characters recognizing once they had swapped places and they disrupted their norm, they were realizing what they actually want out of life. So while I liked all of those things, I just felt like the book kind of became very repetitive because it was, oh wow, this XYZ thing is going well, except for these people think I'm my sister, and then the other sister would be like, oh, this thing didn't go well. Oh no, my sister is going to be disappointed. And then that same thing would happen to this sister, but then this sister would have something go well and she'd be like, oh no, but people think I'm my sister. And it was just that until the very end where everybody lived happily ever after. To the extreme. I've never read a happier ending, and it was so happy that I'm like, this is a little much. You know, I'm not asking for despair, and I'm not even asking for mild misery. It's just, it was whatever you can think of as a stereotypical happy ending, it was probably included. I'm really not kidding. Whatever comes to mind, probably present. So that was that story. I think that if you want just something really, really sweet, you want to feel the sweetness literally within the fact that they're describing baking all the time. And I liked the descriptions of the food and the baking. I felt like I genuinely learned about, because I don't know anything about baking. I felt like I was learning while I was reading about them. If you just want something that's just sweet and nice and not too much conflict, I think that this book could be really comforting around the holiday season. But I tend to prefer when stories, it depends. Sometimes I like just pure sweetness, but I don't think that this was the story for that for me personally. Then the last one for today, which was my favorite. I had a good time with this. I thought it was so zany. I thought it was a lot of fun. It 100% is extremely tropey, but I think a lot of you have learned over the course of, if you fairly regularly watch my reviews, I like when books are pretty self-aware, and this book is self-aware. So it's kind of almost... it almost identifies its own tropes in a sense and makes fun of them for being what's transpiring in the book. So Kiss Her Once for Me, I almost don't want to tell you the premise because it's tropey, but it's also a play on a trope. But I'm going to let you know. The setup is that at the very beginning of the story, it actually kind of had a similar situation to One Day in December, where these two individuals came together, they met, and over the course of a single day that they spent together, they really had this great connection. They were very physically attracted to each other, but on top of that, they felt such a sense of closeness and understanding from the other person. They just instantly got along in every way, and they genuinely spent the whole day together. And they want to pursue something after this, but something happened, and you don't know what happened, but something happened where the main character felt very betrayed by the person and decided, oh, I guess I was just a casual one-night stand. I thought it was something more, but I guess I was wrong. And she has thought about this person a lot over the course of this last year because she's just wondering, like, wow, am I just bad at reading the signs? I thought things were going well. I'm not upset at them if they just wanted a one-night stand, but I guess I thought it was something more, and they're struggling with that. But more so in their everyday life, they're struggling because they had their dream job and they lost it. And they're having to work at this coffee shop. They live in Portland, and the author captures Portland exceptionally well. And I also really liked how it embraced Portland as a setting, and it kind of poked fun at Portland also at the same time, in a way that I feel like only somebody familiar with that area could. Anyway, they work at this coffee shop. The people who work at the coffee shop with her are very much people that you would expect to come. The customers are people you'd expect to come in. The people that she works with, her boss, there's just all these characters that I liked the level of both accuracy and playfulness with these characters. But she can hardly afford where she's living, and she already lives in a terrible place. So she's struggling financially. Her mom is a terrible parent, always asking her for money, always guilt-tripping her about money, always just making her feel little. And she puts down a lot of what matters to her. But it's her mom, and she's always wanted her mom's approval. She's always been hopeful that one day her mom will be more accepting and they'll finally have a better relationship. And thus far, it's not really happened, but she thinks like, well, I gotta take care of my mom. I mean, she did take care of me when I was growing up, so I feel like I owe it to her. You can see it's a pretty unhealthy dynamic. But rent is gonna go up where she's living, and if she does not get a raise at work, she is not sure if she's gonna be able to have the sucky place that she lives in, and she's honestly afraid she's gonna turn out to be homeless. She just doesn't know what to do. She's already been trying to start over, but even that's going poorly for her. So she's kind of at her rock bottom. And then this guy that owns the property of the coffee shop she works at, he discovers his very, very wealthy grandfather who just died, whose company he has worked at and he has been a part of for years, even though his grandpa was terrible and made him feel horrible as a person. He has dealt with all of that. His grandfather has died, and it turns out, rather than just having the inheritance, which is a lot of money, rather than just having the inheritance for him, he put in a stipulation because he's a little kind of icky when it comes to like, we need to keep the bloodline pure kind of vibes, that he insists that the money will not go to this man unless he is married. It is 100% a rom-com bizarre scenario, but he's like, are you serious? Of course, even from the grave, my grandfather is making my life suck. And our main character is hearing him rant about all these things, and a little bit she's like, I mean, you're super rich, like, come on. But she's like, yeah, that does suck. And he's like, yeah, I don't know, like, who's gonna marry me? And she's like, well, you're very attractive and you're rich. a lot of people would be willing to marry you. And he's like, well, okay, you marry me then. She's like, well, no, I'm not going to marry you. And he's like, see, that's what I'm saying. You're not even willing to marry me. So who else would? And she's like, that's a little rude, but okay. And they get super drunk and then they agree to get married. They haven't gotten married just yet, but they agree they're going to get married. And she just needs to sell it so that they can convince the family they'll get married and then they'll quietly split up after about a year or so. And so she goes with him to the family cabin. And then this is the part that I almost don't want to tell you because this is where it's like a fun play on the typical like marriage, you know, like the marriage of convenience, but it turns out they actually end up liking each other. It's a play on that trope because when they go back to his family's cabin, who is his sister? It's the person that she was with a year ago that she's kind of been hung up on for a year. And then that creates a whole weird dynamic because the sister is like, oh my gosh. And she doesn't know what to do because it's her brother's fiance, or so she thinks. And also the main character's like, you're rich? She had no idea that this woman was a part of this super wealthy family that's well known in Portland. And the family is super nice and really loving, and it's making our character realize, like, wow, my family sucks in comparison. I've never had a family before. And she starts to feel so bad about lying to them, about being engaged. And he's like, you got to keep it up. Don't you need the money? You need the money. I've been to your place. Your place sucks, and you're poor. You need this money. And she's like, hey, I mean, I know, but still. He is a himbo to the extreme. And he's 100% in love with one of his friends. It's actually his sister's best friend. He's absolutely in love with that person. And she starts to see where there are issues within the family, specifically with his dad, and she starts to really feel for him. And I just thought that their relationship was really funny. And then he obviously has feelings for someone else. Our main character obviously has feelings for his sister, but she can't tell him that because she's like, I mean, I feel like that would be so weird and so awkward. And I also, do I talk to her? Do I pretend like I don't even remember? What do I do? And it's so over the top. And again, when I was saying it's very aware of itself, she's like, this isn't even a love triangle. This is like a love trapezoid. What am I doing? I enjoyed how much it knew what it was, and it just had the best time with it. So that was my favorite. I mentioned before I was going to let you know favorite to least favorite, and then I was going to guess what the average ratings would place them at, and then actually look at the average ratings. So we'll go ahead and do that now. From first to fifth, I have Kiss Her Once for Me at the top, and then A Winter in New York, even though that might be surprising because I took issue with a lot of the conflicts as I felt they were very forced. The things that I thought it did well, I liked enough to put it in second place. These two are pretty close to tied, the Holiday Swap and In a Holidaze, but I think that I just personally, I think the descriptions of the food was really what got me for this one to put it just a little bit above this. And also this one with the whole like, I hope he believes me. I don't know what I'm going to do if he doesn't believe me that I've been going back in time over and over again. I'm just like, you know. And then I don't think I need to clarify why One Day in December is at the bottom. I just hated those characters so much. So that's my ranking. If I had to guess, I would normally think that because there's cheating in One Day in December, they all have such like similar things going on. Sorry. Since there's cheating, I normally would be like, oh, well, maybe people don't like that, and that would make it go lower. But I'm not even remembering the name of the book. I can picture the cover. There's people jumping into some water, and I think the font is orange. And it was something I read last year, and I definitely didn't like it. And people love it, apparently. And it's a really hyped book in romance circles, or maybe it's just certain circles, and I don't know. But anyway, that book had cheating, and people really like it. And I didn't feel like the exploration of what causes a person to do that and the after effects and the work that they do with themselves, like I didn't feel like that was done. I think it was just kind of in there. So I would say this one, but I don't know. Maybe some people really wanted Jack and her to be together, and I was like, whatever. They can be, because why not? They're both terrible. But anyway, so I would think this would go at the bottom. I'm going to say I think it might be because the premise is so absurd that I think it loses a lot of people in that. And the characters are pretty unlikable. So I think that maybe there's a chance that this one will be at the bottom. So we're going to say that's 5th for other people. I think maybe A Winter in New York, that the forced conflicts will be enough to irritate people. So I think maybe that one will be 4th place. I think maybe the Holiday Swap will be 3rd because I think it's just so Hallmark Lifetime movie-esque that I don't know if that is as popular within the romance genre. I'm so clueless about this though, so I'm happy to say I'm wrong, which I'm sure I will be. So I'm going to put that one there. I don't know if everybody else is going to have as much fun with this one as I did. And it is so ridiculous that I could see people being like, dude, are you serious? Like, oh, sure, yeah, it's his sister. What do you know? I don't know. I could see people being annoyed that it's so over the top. So I'm going to put that there. And I feel like this one's going to be at the top because it's a little bit more generic without being exceptionally spicy or exceptionally vanilla. So I think it kind of maybe will fit that for some people. And I'm pretty sure this is a popular author. I think that one's going to be at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and check the average ratings and we'll see how wrong I am. But just for visuals, if it helps, here is what I think the ranking is going to be based off of Goodreads. Let's find out. I was quite incorrect. I have the average ratings written over here, so I'm going to look at them and I'm going to change these out. So this one, Holidaze, which I thought maybe would be the most generally appealing, and also I think the author's pretty popular. It turned out that this one was 2nd from the bottom, so this is actually going to go way down here. And then tied for 1st, oh no, is the one that I liked the most, Kiss Her Once for Me, and One Day in December. They're tied, my 1st and bottom. Why? These characters are zany and ridiculous and fun and relatable in a lot of ways. These ones are relatable if, you know, if you suck. So those are tied at the top. And then the Holiday Swap actually is the one that goes at the bottom. I feel like I rearranged these in a really weird way. There was probably a more efficient, easier way to do it. But this is how Goodreads users would put these. And I know they're tied, but I can't leave that one. I can't do it. I've got to put this one on the top. So that's it. This is what Goodreads users think of these books. Obviously, that's not fair because it's not like everybody has read all 5 of these or anything like that. But I just thought it'd be kind of a fun way to tie everything together. This was definitely successful in keeping me from reading Wind and Truth. And for that, I'm glad. And I did kind of have fun peeking through and seeing this niche, a very specific subgenre. I had fun exploring these. These were just kind of, you listen to the audiobook while you're doing something around the house, while you're putting up Christmas decor, or while you're baking cookies or something. It's fun. It's fun to have these sorts of things. And I do find that contemporary stories, even though Holidaze is kind of, had a little extra to it, but I do find that these kinds of stories, when there is chaos around the holidays, they can definitely do a lot to provide comfort or feel like there's some form of stability. Or maybe you in your own life don't have traditions that a lot of other families do, or maybe you are experiencing one of your first holiday seasons without a loved one. And these sorts of stories can just serve to provide something that is really comforting and silly and fun in what can be a very difficult time for a lot of people. So for that, I am really glad that books like this exist. And also, if you just in general like these kinds of stories, I'm happy that there are so many different books out there for so many different kinds of readers. And just within this subgenre, I found there was such a huge mix of different kinds of things represented, different kinds of characters represented, different ways that people fall in and out of love. they really all were quite different from each other, even when they utilized similar tropes. So I would be curious to try other holiday romances. Maybe next year I'll have to do New Year's ones or something like that and see how those compare to each other. But they were not alike. And so for that, I liked the way in which they all stood out individually, even if some of the reasons they stood out to me weren't things that I necessarily liked about them. But anyway, thanks so much. I know we're kind of coming up on the end of the year here, so I just wanted to also, as an aside, say thank you so much for your continued support, for all of your reading suggestions, and if I ask for feedback, I feel like so many of you are very open and kind in offering that feedback. And just in general, I really appreciate getting to talk about books with all of you. I touched on a second ago that I know the holidays can be hard for a lot of people when maybe they're different than they were in the past. And the last few years for me have been different for my holiday seasons. Most of you know why. 2020, lost my dad. He was pretty much my favorite person on the planet. I mean, I love my husband. I love my mom too. So I have a few favorites, but that was really challenging. And I remember that first Christmas and my first Thanksgiving without my dad, and that was really challenging. And last year, my grandma passed away, both two people who were an integral part of my life, of my upbringing, and who were two of the best supportive people in the world. They were just whatever you could want from a nice dad and whatever you could imagine for a cute, nice old lady grandma. Those were what I had, and I don't have them anymore. I know that's not something I'm experiencing in isolation. I know a lot of people experience that too. So just want to let you know I'm right there with you, and I appreciate for all of you who have been there with me throughout the years. It means more than you could ever know. But anyway, I have gone on and on and on for this video, so I hope this little random holiday video was fun, and hopefully it supplies some entertainment or whatever reasons you're watching. I hope it provides that for you. Luna Bear is waiting eagerly for me to feed her, so I'm gonna go do that. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.